Hello, I'm Eric Meskel with EMSNOW. Sorry that this is getting used to. This presentation, there will be three of us speaking. I will begin, Dieter Weiss will follow me, and Dr. Mareike Haas will follow that. I think Dieter and I will be doing it in English. Mareike will be, die spricht auf Deutsch. So I'm here to talk about the global or we all are, about the global EMS industry and share some information that we've been gathering and some of the efforts we're putting out. It's a very interesting title that Dieter put up here, Growth Abroad, Stagnation at Home, because home for him is Europe, home for me is in the United States. So it's a little different, but the intention here is to talk about the global industry in general, some activities that we're doing, and then speak much more specifically about what's happening here in Europe. Green button, that's us. You don't need to see that. Who we are, you don't need to see that. It'll be in your slides. I run EMSNOW, it's a news site. Dieter runs, and Mareike are with Informa, which is the market research. How we work, I don't really want to talk about this. We gather a lot of information about the EMS industry is the point. One of the ways we do this, since 2021, Dieter Weiss and I have gone on the road, what we call on tour. We go around, we visit with EMS companies. This is a list of all the tours that we've done to date. And our last one, we just finished yesterday, actually. So this was the most recent one. And all of these, we try to go around. We try to do meetings with management teams at various companies in the different regions that we're in and learn more about the industry. We do podcasts and we publish industry reports for free. We don't charge for that. So if you're ever interested in that type of information, you can go to emsnow.com and they're all available there for free. This was our latest tour was an interesting one in that we focused on CEOs at the larger, mostly Nordic-based EMS companies, because we think they're one of the great success stories in the market currently within Europe. And we were very fortunate to meet with the CEOs at 9 EMS companies. And we've been talking about that, doing podcasts. We'll be issuing a report on that. Some of the data I'm going to share, or that we're going to share, reflects that. There we go. So how big is this EMS market? I've been in the EMS industry since 1998 in some form or fashion, mostly on the market research consulting side. And since I started in 98, the general assessment is that there are just too many damn EMS in the world. You know, there are just so many of them. And we understand why, and that's true in all regions. The data that we're reflecting up here are, we'll start with Europe. Dieter Weiss and Informa started as a market research firm here covering the industry in Europe, so that was where the base database came from. And I think Dieter has done a fantastic job keeping up on that and reporting on that. So you can see all those. He says roughly about 19 companies. There's even more facilities, but that's actual companies. Then in the United States, come over the pond, there are a lot there too. So in the United States, about 1,450. Then you see how many facilities are down in Mexico and how many are up in Canada. And then we go to the Wild West, which is Asia, which is who knows how many people who are technically EMS companies are out there. For EMS, for us, basic definition that we try to apply is that you have to do printed circuit board assembly as a basic service. So if you're just cable assembly and not doing PCBA, we would generally not include you. If you do PCBA but also do cable card, we will include you. So it's right or wrong, that's how we do it. So that gives you an idea of kind of the overall how big that is, or how many players there are, and how they're divided. We started an effort to kind of support this last year. Well, we issued it this year for the first time ever. Dieter and I, last year, when we heard that there were some changes happening with some market researchers in the industry, we decided that we would start our own list, because the list of top EMS and ODMs globally was we weren't sure if it was going to continue. So we launched this effort. It's a joint effort between EMSNOW and Informa. And we started gathering information on EMS companies anywhere in the world that have $100 million US in revenue or higher. And we then published a list of the top 100. We just published this list, and I'm going to share some data with that for you. You can go and see the list on either of our websites at any time. We issued the list in March. It's going to be reissued here probably August, September, because it's changed already. As soon as we did it, we started discovering more. We had companies reaching out to us. So it's, I think, an exciting adventure. But what it also did is it changed our view of the industry if we looked at traditional assessments. This here reflects, and then we started with 24-25 revenue and then moved back to 2020. So you can see how and this reflects, by the way, only the 100 EMS companies that are on our published list. We're going to make a distinction between the 100 that are published and the 138 that we have on our total on our watch list that we're tracking. But the good news there is that the EMS industry grew quite nicely between 2024 and 2025. An important thing here is this bottom data point. 64 of the top 100 companies are public companies. Public companies it's easy to get information about. Private companies are a little harder. Not so much here in Europe, where you guys are very good about reporting all your financials. In the United States, we're not so good. If you're private, there's a good reason you're private, because you don't want to have to share information. So, but we're getting information from them as well, and usually what that means is that we do outreach to them, we tell them what we're doing, and we ask them. I have relationships with many of them, so I reach out and I talk to them. They're willing to share it under confidentiality, but we do not publish their actual numbers. But if you look at the list, if they're located here and you have a public company above and below them, you can pretty much guess what range their revenue are in. So it's easy to do the assessment. But you see what's happening there. But the total was $820 billion in 2025. That's an interesting number to me, because if you look at in detail, I'll share something on this later, the traditional assessments of how big the EMS and ODM market is, most people have it sized much smaller. And by the way, spoiler alert, when we issue our next one, it's going to be even bigger, because we've discovered quite a few more. I've gotten some private company. I did an interview recently with the CEO of an EMS in the United States, private company, used to be public, now they're private. They're $500 million. Their numbers weren't on our first list, so that's going to jump it pretty dramatically. And we have some really good examples that will follow up on that. Where are those headquarters for those 100 companies on our list? This reflects this. The story is this is still a very Asia-dominated industry. And I'll show you some more on that now. This activity is still very, very strongly dominated by Asia. Europe has 32 on the top 100 list. The United States has only 18. But I will say there's a nice competition between Dita and myself, because my job is to get that 18 up. His job is to get the 32 up, because he reflects Europe so well. His job is easier because you all publish your data over here, and he can go into the annual books. In the United States, it's not so simple. And there's actually a change in the United States right now being considered to extend that reporting time to 6 months rather than quarterly, which is going to be very challenging too. Whatever it is, the important thing here is that most of this is still in Asia, Europe, and the United States fall behind. But if you look at it from a revenue perspective, the picture starts changing. So this is a big pie chart that shows kind of from the revenue, not 26, 25, right, Dita?
Yeah, 25.
That's not, that number's wrong.
No, it's right, because we always...
Oh, because we published it in 26 based on 25, that's right. Look at this. If you take Taiwan without Foxconn, listen, Foxconn alone is 31.3% of the market, right? So if you want to know what's happening in the EMS industry, just follow Foxconn, basically. But if you add Taiwan and then China and Hong Kong, you've got 82.7% of the global market for EMS and ODM is just right there in that area, which is huge. The Americas, we have 11.4%. Europe follows at 2.5%, and you see how it tracks down there. The interesting story here, and we'll talk about in a little bit too, is India. India is an exciting market, getting a lot of attention for good reason. But that gives you a good sense of kind of the market and where this is. Let's talk about Foxconn. That's Foxconn, their revenues from 2020 through 2025. You see the numbers here, you also see the growth at the top. And this over here, this chart is reflecting how big, what percentage that is of the overall market from a revenue perspective. Americas, of course, is primarily North America. It's dominated by the US and some Canadian-based ones. Mexico doesn't have domestic EMS companies. That's an export market. The companies there tend to be owned by large companies who are headquartered elsewhere that have facilities down there. But you see what's happening there with Foxconn, nice growth of 41.3% over this 5-year period. Here's Taiwan alone taking Foxconn out. Of course, Foxconn is headquartered there, but we take it out just for demonstration purposes of those other companies, which are major companies. You see a very nice growth rate there. You'll notice red numbers over 2022 on most of these slides because that was that downturn post-COVID. We had a little ramp up and then it came down. Here's China and Hong Kong, because of course, Hong Kong is part of China, right? So, although those companies used to be very different back in the day, now we consider them all the same. The only two that didn't that had consistent growth over the time frame were two regions. It was China and it was India. All other ones had some years of decline in there. So for this, it's over 117% revenue growth over the forecast period for those companies. India. Currently, 6 companies on our top 100 list are headquartered in India. This is, I think, a very exciting region to watch. I did a tour there last year and spent 2 weeks visiting EMS companies over there. It's got its challenges, but I think it's a very exciting region of the world that bears watching, and they are doing things right finally. I was telling Dennis before that I did my first market research study on India in probably about 2004, 2005, and for the next 15 years, everything we said in that report were probably still true. Then finally, in the last, say, 5 years or so, with the government and the incentives and what they're doing there, it has finally changed and turned. And India today is really like China was 20 years ago. If you think of the growth and development, what happened in China 20 years ago, it's exactly what's happening in India today. But this is a very strong growth, 366% over the time period here. Southeast Asia, same kind of thing. For us, we have 8 companies in Southeast Asia on our list. They are headquartered in those countries up there: Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines. They're sizable companies. And remember too, these companies also have facilities in different regions of the world. Our data reflects where is the headquarters, not where is the particular region. That's another analysis that we'll get to at a further iteration. Japan has 6 of them up there. Japan's always been a good one. This very nice kind of steady growth with that little downturn there that they did. Americas, nice growth. We had 18 of the headquartered companies in North America. You see what happens there. They've had good growth, 24% growth over this time period. Who are those companies? Most of them you know, and like I was saying, most of these have, at least the ones on the upper side there, have global footprints that span all the major geographies around the world. Of course, my observation, it's just my opinion, that's starting to lessen a bit, the whole labor arbitrage game where where's the lowest, cheapest price where we can get something built around the world. We figured it out years ago. It's in sub-Saharan Africa, if you want the lowest labor price on the planet, but don't go there. There's a lot of problems there, and it's not a good place to be building. But a lot of companies have chased that labor arbitrage. That's settling down now, thankfully. And but most of these companies are there. Next time you see this list, my goal is to have even more than 18 up there, hopefully, 2025. And I think that's very achievable because I think there are a lot of private companies in the United States still that we do not have on our list. And my goal in the next quarter or so is to get outreach to them and to get them to participate and share their numbers with us. So Dieter doesn't like me talking about Europe, so this is where he only lets me talk about the United States. He's very possessive that way, so I'm going to turn this over to him, but I'll stick around too, and if there's questions at the end, we'll put those all together there.
Well,
Herr Weiss?
yeah, thank you very much, Eric. Yeah, as Eric said, there is probably some more out there which we still have on our watch list but haven't fully developed their revenues as of now. As Eric mentioned before, we have 2/3 of the company being public companies where it's so easy to pick the revenues from the internet, but then we have a lot of private companies, and as Eric said as well, in Europe it's not a problem. I go into the country company registers and pick out the revenues, and maybe we don't get the latest revenues immediately, but latest after 9 months we have the 2025 numbers as well. And what we do in that respect, we call up people, and Eric does that as well in the United States. He calls them up and says what we are doing, and then the people normally give Eric the numbers under confidentiality agreement, and that's it. So if we then now switch to Europe, and again, having looked at these numbers, 32 in Europe, 18 in the United States or in the Americas, yeah, means 50 companies out of the 100 are from the Western world. Still, they only make 13.8% of the revenues, and that is the problem. And you see the same over here. Even so, it looks as if it's a nice growth rate from 2020 to 2025 of 72%. And even in 25, a growth rate of 5.8. Let's be realistic, the majority of that was mergers and acquisitions. Yeah? And even today, we know already that in 2026, there will be another inorganic growth of those companies at least of 5.3%, because a lot of companies just had the closing of their acquisitions, which they started in 25. The closing was only in January 26, so they are not reflected in here. And that means, in actual fact, organic growth? No. And Maheike will talk about that later a little bit more in detail. So who are the companies, the 32 companies that are on the list? You probably know all of them. And I'm not going too much into that. But as usual, not everybody is making revenue increases. We have companies as well who are having a decline of their business, and we see that over here. Out of the 100 company, it was 16 from Asia who had lower revenues, 11 from Europe, and 4 from the Americas. And on the other side, you see that it is 69% of the companies with revenue increases, and even some, like for example, Wistron, who is number 3 on our list, they had an increase of their revenues in 2025 by 116%. And on, I think, number 9, we have Wellwin. They had the biggest one. They had 156 or 157% revenue increase. And I'm going to get to that shortly in regards to why that is the case. Now, first of all, let's have a look at the top 30. I had to bring it to top 30 for the simple reason, otherwise there would have been not a single European company on there. It is Zollner, the only one on position 28, who was able to make it under the top 30. And you can see as well, we saw that Foxconn 31.3%, but already the top 10 of the global 100 are doing nearly 75% of the revenues. And if we take the top 25, that number increases to 733 billion. Yeah? So you can as well say, actually the lower part of that list of the top 100, which has a lot of European companies in it, actually still is not playing the main role. And that is a reason we're going to talk about that later in the podcast, which we do today on our trip, where we still say that the European EMS industry still lacks further consolidation. We need to further enlarge the systems. And even if you think an EMS company with 100 or 200 million, good size? Sorry, no, not a good size, too small. And when I say that, yeah, let me be realistic. That does not mean that there is no room for small companies in the region of 5 to 20. Yes, there is room for, but they are serving a different market and different customers. Now, and that is the chart which I actually made reference to. Wistron, not on number 3, but on number 2, 115% growth in 25. Ywin, some people say, hey, why do you put that separate? Ywin is 30% owned by Wistron, yeah, but it's still only 30%, so we take that separate. Whereas others we have now consolidated, like Kimpo Electronics and Qualcomm Electronics, they are both owned by new Kimpo Group, and that's why they are shown over here together. And then you see as well Acton Technology Corporation with a plus, but you see as well a couple of companies with a minus, yeah? Like for example, Compal Electronics in Taiwan, minus 16.7. Why? Compal Electronics is in the majority working for the automotive industry. They are a big supplier of Stellantis over here in Europe, yeah? And Stellantis actually forced them to build a factory in Europe, and that factory was built in Poland last year. And believe it or not, when the factory was finished, fully equipped, they decided to shut it down. So there is a brand new facility in Poland, and you can buy it if you want to. I will help you on that. Yeah? So that's number one. Number two is over there, TPV Technology is a company which is doing consumer electronics, in the majority TVs, and that is not running well in present as well. And as I said before, the top 20, 733 billion, which equals 89% of the top 100. Yeah? Now, where does the growth come from? The growth comes from hyperscale service and data center networking. And that means it is in the majority not EMS, it's ODMs who are working on that. The company is profiting from it. It's Wistron, Quanta, Ywin, Foxconn, Inventec, Mytec. And they directly sell to AWS, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Alibaba, and so on. Whereas on the data center networking, it's typically broken out by OEM companies like Cisco, Arista, HPE, Huawei, Uniper, etc. But they as well source those products in the ODM industry. And those systems are totally different from what you know from the past. data center equipment runs 24 hours, 7 days a week, and requires totally different electronics architecture. It requires, you have to imagine that some of these boards inside are 60 to 80 layer multi-layer boards, that thick. And even the chip packages, which you might know from the past like this, BGAs, no, they're 10 to 13 centimeters long and having 5 to 7,500 balls. And the signal integrity on those boards is very important as well, which means you cannot manufacture that with a standard FR4 material. And instead, you are using a different glass. Rather than E-glass, you're using T-glass, which has a different dielectric constant. In addition, the copper foil, you have to make sure that is very uniform. So all of that is changing the PCB industry. And if you are faced at the moment with 40% price increases on the PCB side, that is the reason. And that continues. It continues this year. We see it at Quanta, Inventec, Wistron, all in the first quarter have seen dramatic increases. The same, yeah, for Foxconn, Enocon technology. That is standard news. Yeah. Now, as I said, it's not just PCBs who are a problem. Those data centers need a lot of logic and memory chips. And so more or less, the semiconductor industry in regards to logic and memory has been sold out for all of 26 and nearly all of 27 as well. At the same time, we see call-offs of DDR2, DDR3 being phased out. DDR4, I think, has been a little bit extended, but will be shortly phased out. So we're talking about DDR5 and HBM products. On the memory side here, therefore, you see a year-over-year change of plus 193%, whereas on the non-memory side, it's just 16.6. So it means as well, don't start storing all semiconductors. Don't give the total bomb to your distributors and fill your inventories. You're just locking up cash. I'm skipping over this. This is from WSTS on the prognosis for this year, showing you as well where the music is going to play. Yeah, here that as well. We see still some red numbers in 2024, but in 2026 the forecast is IC Micro 13.9, but Logic 32% and memory 39%. So, and here you see the segments, artificial intelligence service, traditional data centers, and consumer electronics doesn't play a real big role in regards to the growth prognosis. So, as I said before, that's why I can skip it. The biggest problem is not the semiconductor. The biggest, because the industry was prepared for this shortage of semiconductors. They were not prepared in regards to the PCB, and you might have read it. Some of the laminate manufacturers already have announced an allocation situation for ordinary FR4 material and 7628 prepregs. So that will be a very big challenge for everybody. And now we hear as well that everybody is filling the order books. Yeah, the situation is much better than 25. But what does it help you if at the end you don't have the PCB to manufacture it? So if we split the global ones into revenue groups as well, you see as well, again, the big players who are in the majority as well, those who are supplying the data centers, they have the biggest growth rate of 31%, and the smaller it gets, the lower the growth rate, and as well, the more it is related to the standard growth rates in the other sectors. Now, Eric mentioned that before. When we started the analysis, we wanted to find out how big is the EMS industry globally in general. So we asked artificial intelligence, and those were the numbers, and they were not for 24, they were for 25. On the average, they said something between 570 to 635 billion US dollar would be the market. Now you have seen it in Eric's chart, already the top 100 we calculated, and this is primary research, came out to be 820 billion. So a deviation of 35%. So we asked artificial intelligence as well, why is that the case? And then artificial intelligence showed that, well, it's often historical estimates that these people are using, and then they said, well, you are measuring reality. Yeah? I liked that. Yeah? I thanked artificial intelligence for that, yeah, but they didn't respond. Anyhow, so that is the big difference. And now comes the big question, how big is the market in total? Yeah? And you have seen we are now on 137 EMS with more than 100 billion in revenues. And we know whom are we missing. We're missing all the companies with less than 100 million. And in Europe, we know exactly how much it is, because we know Europe in total, so we just deviate those revenues of companies with facilities over here in Europe, which we already have on the top 100 list. We do the same in America. Those are the numbers. Asia is the only thing where we do not know exactly, and that's where we have to take an average and the outcome. And then we have to add some revenues from big OEMs who have a side business in EMS, and some of that is substantial, so we cannot just neglect that. And the outcome is that it is 969, or let's say 970 or 980 billion US dollar in 2025. And that brings us to the total addressable market. The total addressable market being the combination of EMS and ODM and OEM. Yeah? And here we have to take an assumption. Normally in the discussions with other experts, we see that people think EMS is either doing 40% or maybe even 50%. We took the average of 45, and calculating that, we get to a total of 2.1 trillion US dollars for 2025. So it tells you how much more your salespeople can try to get. So size matters, we talked about that. But data centers is just one thing. What we are now seeing is China, in the majority, is developing a lot of humanoid robots, yeah? And they're advanced on many of that. And our biggest problem is we are talking. Yeah? We are not doing. Yeah? That is the difference. And hey, and we have a lot of good regulations by the governments and by the European Union who all tell us what we are allowed to do and what we are not allowed to do. You don't find that in China, you don't find that in Taiwan. They let the people work. Yeah? So China has the speed and we have a lot of systems. That is our big difference, and that is the problem why Europe is suffering. And that allows me to hand over to Mareike. No? You want me to show one more? I should do that as well? Okay. Yeah. So if we compare the China and Taiwan business with the Western world, a combination of the Americas and Europe, we see that the Far East grew by 53%, whereas Europe over a period and Western and Americas grew in total only by 30%. And that is the problem. And in the combination, we see plus 10% from 24 to 25. And let's be realistic, that was the Americas. It was not Europe. And now I hand over to Mareike for the next slide to explain to us this situation further.
Thank you. Genau, jetzt wechseln wir die Perspektive weg von dem globalen Vogel zu der europäischen und Dachperspektive. Als erstes noch so ein kleiner Übergang, und zwar die europäischen globalen EMS, die global tätig sind, haben 2020 11,67 Milliarden US-Dollar gemacht. 2025 waren es dann schon 20,12 Milliarden US-Dollar. Das ist ein Wachstum von 72,4%. Im Vergleich dazu hat das gesamte Volumen in Europa einen Umfang von 51,62 Milliarden US-Dollar und ist auf 60,3 Milliarden in den 5 Jahren angewachsen. Das ist dann ein Wachstum von insgesamt 16,8%. Daraus schlussfolgert man, dass die globalen EMS, das sind überwiegend die börsennotierten skandinavischen Unternehmen, aber auch Cicor, 4-mal schneller gewachsen sind als der Durchschnitt des Gesamtmarktes. Und das haben sie aber überwiegend in den Werken außerhalb Europas gemacht und zudem auch sehr stark durch Merger Acquisitions, wie der ein oder andere unter Ihnen sicherlich weiß. Gezwungen zu wachsen haben gerade die börsennotierten EMS in den letzten Jahren sehr stark zugekauft. Jawohl. Gut, kommen wir zu den Veränderungen im Markt. Anfang des Jahres veröffentlichen wir immer eine Jahresstatistik. Da hatten wir 397 Melder mit einem Minus von 2,9% gesamt. Da sind wir jetzt schon ein bisschen weiter. Jetzt haben wir nämlich 986 EMS, allerdings dann auch ein Minus von 4,9%. Insgesamt 3/4 davon, 743 EMS, haben Verlust gemacht. Von 24 auf 25. Darunter befinden sich auch 35 EMS, die Ende 2024 oder im Laufe des Jahres 2025 ihre Tore und ihre Fertigung schließen mussten. Und wenn man sich dann die Verteilung anschaut, so sieht man, dass das Gros der EMS, nämlich 348, einen Verlust in der Range von 0 bis minus 5% erleiden mussten, sage ich jetzt mal, gefolgt von 191, die dann in der Range darunter von minus 5 bis minus 10% Umsatzverlust liegen. Und auf der Gewinnerseite ist auch das Gros der Unternehmen nur in einem geringen Wachstumsbereich von 0 bis plus 5% unterwegs. Kommen wir zur regionalen Aufteilung. Auch das auf der Basis der Jahresstatistik mit erweiterten Zahlen. Wir gruppieren, wenn wir nicht genug Melder haben, die Länder auch zusammen zu Gruppen, was man hier sieht. Und die Area of Prozent in Europe ist im Grunde genommen der Market Share, also der Anteil des Umsatzes der Gruppe oder des Landes an dem Gesamtumsatz Europas. Dann die Anzahl der Unternehmen, von denen wir Zahlen vorliegen haben. Die Zahl danach ist die Zahl, die aussagt, wie viel Umsatz diese Melder am Gesamtumsatz der Gruppe ausmachen. Und dann nochmal, ob es einen Verlust oder einen Gewinn in der gesamten Gruppe gab. Ich will nur ein paar Gruppen highlighten. Das sind zum einen die nordischen Länder. Auch da wieder der Anklang zu den börsennotierten Unternehmen. Diese Gruppe konnte ein Plus von 6,5% machen, deckt die Hälfte des gesamten Marktes nach Umsatz ab. stark getriggert, wie gesagt, durch die Zukäufe der börsennotierten Unternehmen, aber auch darin begründet, dass diese Unternehmen auch sehr stark im Defense-Bereich sich engagieren. Wenn wir zu den Baltikum-Ländern wechseln, dann haben wir dort eine wirklich ganz tolle, fantastische Rate von 93,6% Abdeckung der Melder. Das hat damit zu tun, dass die baltischen Länder sehr zeitig in die Register auch melden, sodass man neben den Meldern aus den Ländern auch dort sehr schnell Zahlen bekommt. Auch diese Länder profitieren davon, dass sie Low-Cost-Countries für die skandinavischen Länder sind und haben dementsprechend auch ein gutes Plus von 12,5% gemacht. Schauen wir uns Dach an, ist an Market Share mit 21,5% die größte Region. Haben wir auch schon 511 Meldungen oder Jahresabschlüsse zusammen. Eine gute Abdeckung von fast 88%, aber ein Minus von 6,9%. Nehmen wir die Gruppe im Mediterranean-Raum, also sprich Spanien, Italien, Portugal, dann muss man sagen, dass diese Gruppe sehr stark beeinflusst ist durch die Schließung des Werkes von Jabil. Da komme ich nachher bei den Personalzahlen auch nochmal dazu. Die haben die Produktion nach Kroatien verlagert und waren aber vorher so groß, dass das sehr stark zu Gewicht geschlagen hat. Wenn man die rausrechnen würde, bekämen wir auf ein Plus von 5,2% in dieser Gruppe. Damit will ich das hier bei diesem Chart erstmal belassen. Wechseln wir zu der Entwicklung im Dachraum, und zwar nach Umsatzgruppen. Gesamt haben wir im Dachraum von 23 auf 24 ein Minus von 14,2% gemacht und in 2025 durften wir nochmal weitere 6,8% bzw. 6,9% verzeichnen. Zusammengenommen über die 2 Jahre hatten wir einen Umsatzverlust von 2,74 Milliarden Euro. Und das ist tatsächlich zusammen, also wenn man die Länder in Skandinavien zusammennimmt, Dänemark, Schweden, Norwegen, Finnland, dann ist das mehr, als diese 4 Länder zusammen an Umsatz in 2024 erwirtschaftet haben. Nach einzelnen Umsatzgruppen. Die Umsatzgruppe mit über 100 Milliarden Euro hatte auf 24 mit 17,3% den größten Verlust zu verzeichnen, hat dann nochmal minus 8,1 gemacht. Die Gruppe 50 bis 100 Millionen Euro Umsatz waren diejenigen, die von 24 auf 25 den geringsten Verlust hatten mit minus 4%. Ich will Sie jetzt nicht mit allen anderen Zahlen und dem Auflisten dessen langweilen, aber man kann ein ziemlich deutliches Muster erkennen. In dem Jahr von 2023 auf 2024 traf es vor allen Dingen die größeren EMS, die größere Verluste zu erleiden hatten. Schaut man sich dann die Entwicklung des letzten Jahres an, dann sieht man, dass das inzwischen relativ flächendeckend auf einem Niveau, so bis auf, wie gesagt, die 4%, auf einem Niveau um die 7% herum sich bewegt und es auch inzwischen die kleineren trifft, die vielleicht vorher noch auch über das ein oder andere Nischenprodukt sich von dem allgemeinen Trend lösen konnten. Ja, wie die meisten wissen, ein Ranking darf bei uns auch nie fehlen. Das ist immer sehr beliebt. Wir haben hier diesmal ein Ranking der Top 10 aus den Dachländern mitgebracht. Ja gut, was muss ich zu Zollner sagen? Wir haben es eben gesehen, Top 28 in der globalen Liste ist natürlich als deutsches Unternehmen ganz vorne dabei. Gefolgt von Kontron, der Rafi Group, TQ Systems, BMK, jetzt Hansa BMK, einer dieser Zukäufe, von dem ich vorhin schon sprach. Ja, und wer findet sich von diesen Unternehmen auch noch auf der Top Global 100 Liste, um da nochmal den Bogen zu schlagen? Kontron ist da noch drauf, GPV, Zico logischerweise als größter Schweizer, auch stark im Defense- und M&A-Bereich tätig. Melex, Rafi, Vario Systems, Hansa BMK und TQ. Das war auch im Grunde genommen die Reihenfolge, die sie im Ranking in der globalen Liste innehaben. So, kommen wir zu einem anderen Thema, was uns tatsächlich aufgefallen ist jetzt bei der Statistik und stark bewegt hat, nämlich das Thema Personalveränderungen. Das hier ist jetzt noch die Personalveränderung von 23 zu 24. Auch da gab es schon sehr starke Veränderungen, aber bevor ich da einsteige, noch mal einen kurzen Blick zurück. In den vorherigen 11 Jahren, nämlich von 2013 bis 2023, hatten wir einen Zuwachs von 36.400 Mitarbeitern in der EMS-Branche. Die Anzahl der Mitarbeiter stieg von 207.300 auf 243.700, ein Plus von 17,6%. Davon haben wir dann im darauffolgenden Jahr mit dem Einbruch der Umsätze 3% an die Luft gesetzt. Und diese 3% Personal, die an die Luft gesetzt wurden, waren überwiegend in Mittel- und Osteuropa, was damit zusammenhängt, dass man dort einfach Mitarbeiter leichter entlassen kann. Insgesamt war Polen mit 1.950 Mitarbeitern am stärksten betroffen, Rumänien folgte mit 1.320, Bulgarien 880 und Tschechien mit 750. Schauen wir uns das Ganze jetzt für das Folgejahr an. Und zwar auf Basis der aktualisierten Jahresstatistik. Das heißt, das erste waren alle EMS in Europa. Das sind jetzt 963 Unternehmen an dieser Stelle. Bei der Jahresstatistik, wie gesagt, die 397 Unternehmen, die wir hatten, das war schon ein Verlust von 3.445 Unternehmen. Jetzt sind wir bei 5.502. Und der neue Schwerpunkt ist, es werden nicht mehr die Mitarbeiter in Osteuropa entlassen, sondern in Westeuropa. 66,2% des Abbaus fand in Westeuropa statt. Schwerpunktmäßig in Deutschland, in Frankreich, aber auch Österreich und Ungarn betroffen. In Ungarn wurde das Prettel Electronics Werk geschlossen Ende 25 und von Italien habe ich bereits gesprochen. Extremer Ausreißer, weil dort wirklich viele Mitarbeiter dann durch die Schließung betroffen waren. Das waren dann entsprechend 417, die dort gehen durften. Wie sieht die Personalentwicklung dann im Dachraum aus? Das waren in Deutschland minus 1,4 auf 24 und 7% in 2025. Da wir ja aber da noch nicht alle Zahlen zusammen haben, ist dieses Ergebnis noch nicht final. Österreich minus 5,2, gefolgt von minus 7,2 und die Schweiz stand im ersten Jahr noch ein bisschen besser da als Österreich, nicht ganz so gut wie Deutschland mit den minus 2,2, aber jetzt auch bei 7. Für Dach gesamt bedeutet das, wir haben über diese 2 Jahre ein Minus von 3.900 Mitarbeitern. Gut. Kommen wir zum Thema M&A, was wir ja auch schon aufgeführt haben. Wir erfassen natürlich neben den Zahlen, die wir zum Teil von Ihnen bekommen oder uns aus den Registern holen, auch was es an Veränderungen gibt, wer wen aufkauft, wer schließt. Und hier habe ich Ihnen einmal zusammengetragen, wie sich diese Akquisitionen auf die Quartale verteilen. Und zwar angefangen bei 2022. Wir haben den niedrigsten Wert mit 4 Akquisitionen im zweiten Quartal 24 gehabt und mit 16 den höchsten Wert jetzt im vierten Quartal 24 und im ersten Quartal 26. Ich muss dazu noch sagen, das sind jetzt die Zeitpunkte der Ankündigung, die wir dort erfasst haben. Es gibt dann ja meistens auch noch das Closing-Datum, was ein bisschen hinterher ist. Das wird aber nicht mehr immer überall veröffentlicht. Insofern halten wir uns an die Ankündigungen der Firmen, wann sie jemanden aufgekauft haben. Und man sieht ziemlich deutlich, dass die Höhepunkte immer um den Jahreswechsel herum sind, mal im Dezember, meistens eher dann im Januar, bis auf das Jahr 24 auf 25, wo es mal umgekehrt war, ist das ein Muster, der sich für alle Jahre wiederfindet. Gut, dann bin ich schon beim Summary. Was haben wir Ihnen mitgebracht? Was können wir Ihnen mitgeben auf den Weg? Als erstes, 2025 hatten wir auf Wachstum und Erholung gesetzt. Sollte der Markt eigentlich so aussehen. Unsere Melder haben sich das über ihre Prognosen sehr gewünscht. Wir waren auch der Meinung, dass das sich so entwickeln würde. Da wussten wir aber noch nicht, was das Thema KI und Rechenzentren mit sich bringt. Das heißt, es führte bei uns zu einer Stagnation, während Asien zweistellig gewachsen ist. Und Taiwan und China, das hatte Eric ja vorhin schon ausgeführt, machen 82% dieses Gesamtshares aus, während Europa gerade mal 2,5% dieser Top Global 100 Umsätze auf sich vereinen kann. Und dann natürlich auch noch den Punkt, den ich auch noch ansprach, dass 75% von unseren 986 Meldern in Europa einen Verlust verzeichnen mussten. Gut, etwas positiver, 2026. 2026 soll die Erholung bringen. Aber da ist dann einmal das Thema, was Dieter angesprochen hat, mit dem Engpass bei den Memory-Halbleitern und mit der Allokation im Bereich Bauteile und Leiterplatten, mit denen jetzt für das zweite Halbjahr zu rechnen ist. Was heißt das für uns? Wir brauchen eine bessere Strategie in Europa für Wachstum, um einfach mit dem Rest mithalten zu können. Aktuell ist dieses Wachstum stark durch M&A getrieben, nicht durch natürliches Wachstum, und letztendlich ist es eine Umverteilung. Wir haben einen Kuchen, den wir nur anders aufteilen, aber wir backen keinen größeren Kuchen. Und da müssen wir hin. Das hilft aber nur, wenn alle zusammenhalten, das heißt die Branche, die Verbände und wir alle uns, auch die einzelnen Unternehmen und wir uns alle dafür engagieren, dass da einfach auch entsprechend was passiert. Gut, und zu allerletzt, wenn Sie jetzt glauben, Sie wissen schon alles, dann muss ich Ihnen sagen, weder in meinen 20 Minuten noch in unserer knappen Stunde gesamt haben Sie alles erfahren und wissen alles. Das heißt, wenn Sie mehr wissen wollen, kommen Sie in 3 Wochen zu unserem EMS-Forum. 180 Teilnehmer haben wir inzwischen. Wir haben noch einige wenige Plätze, dann platzt der Raum aus allen Nähten. Und Sie sind herzlich willkommen, sich ebenfalls noch einzufinden. Und dann, die brauchen wir ein bisschen länger, die Folie. Genau, danken wir allen unseren Sponsoren, die unsere Arbeit unterstützen und es möglich machen, dass wir als kleines Team diese Informationen zusammentragen und präsentieren können. Auch weitere Unterstützer sind herzlich willkommen. Herzlichen Dank.